and we're going to quickly move to Q&A from the floor. So if you have a specific BDC question ready, prepared, there's mics right here, one on each side. Just come up to the mic, and as we close out the last response, I'll call on you to ask your question to the panel. So Lawson, would you like to start?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Lawson Owen with Proactive Dealer Solutions. Proactive, we work with organizations. We help them implement business development centers, whether it be for sales or for service. And we're based out of Charlotte, North Carolina.
DJ Harrington, known as the cardiologist. I have 3 clients here. Lyft is here because of me. We do commercials for Lyft. If you're not a buy here, pay here dealer, you need to go by and see them. I have another client here that sells third-party leads. You need to go by and see them. And I'm here with CarPart, the largest salvage replacement parts business. But I'm a phone trainer. I do Federal Express, Caterpillar, DuPont, and over 1,700 car stores. Sold my first car in 1968.
Wow, 1968. That was a couple of years before I was born. I forgot. My name is Gus Camacho. I'm a dealer out of Southern California, Los Angeles area. We're in a suburb. Our family's been in the business since 1980. We have 4 total stores, 3 independents, 1 new car franchise. New car franchise is something new for us. We've always been independents. We picked up a Mitsubishi store about 2 years ago, actually 3 years ago. BDC's been a big part of our success. We move about 250 vehicles a month, and we've had a BDC center. I think I set it up like back in early 2000s, so it's been a lot of years. So we have got a lot of experience in the BDC, and I'll tell you, of all the things that I've done, probably the most important thing I've ever done was join a 20 group. But the number 2 was to set up a BDC center. So I'm a true believer in BDCs, and hopefully I'll be able to answer some of your questions today and give you some insight into that.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jose Morales with Applied Concepts. We are a coaching and phone skills development company in the automotive space. Been at it since 1983. Really look forward to talking with each of you regarding phone skills and kind of sharing some great thoughts with this panel up here, and we're excited to be part of it. Thank you for having us.
Good afternoon, Michael Brill, B&B Automotive, just outside of Philadelphia. First, I want to just thank Justin and NIADA for inviting us to here. It's a great honor, and particularly for me, though, when I saw the list of people that were going to be on it, I thought this was such an extraordinary opportunity for me, and I hope you'll indulge me just for a minute so I can share that with you. I just met Jose, but the 3 other gentlemen up here have had an enormous influence on not only my life, my business, but particularly my BDC. So it's a great pleasure and honor to be up here with them. Many, many years ago, too many I can think of, I went to a conference and I met this guy named DJ Harrington. He was giving out this, he was doing this presentation, and he had a phone around his neck. And he was teaching phone skills. And I really, coming up from the new car business, I was always very much aware of phones skills, and I thought I'd developed pretty good ones. But he took it to a different level. I came back to my Chevrolet new car dealer, and I said, based on what I just learned from this DJ Harrington, we got to start a phone room. So we built this, he allowed me to build this phone room above the service department, and I would drag the salespeople over there all the time, and they'd be kicking and screaming going over there for their 1 hour allotment of using the phones. But from that, I came back, I started my own business, and then I went to another conference, and I found this technology called Who's Calling. And I had already trained my people. I had a small staff, 3 or 4, I was an independent. And I got this Who's Calling, and it recorded the call, and it also tracked it. But I was so proud of my salespeople that they were already trained by me in phone skills until I listened to Who's Calling. And my top salespeople on Who's Calling were absolutely destroying the calls. And not because they didn't care, not because they weren't talented, that wasn't their strength. And they had too many distractions. So I started my own BDC, and I was in a trailer with my one guy. He was on the other side, an 8x20 trailer, and it was me. And I'd listen to the call, and I'd train, then he'd TO the call to me, and I'd set the appointment. And that's how we started. And then I went to maybe 3 or 4 people. We were selling 50, 60 cars a month with that. Then I went to another conference, and I met Lawson Owen. And Lawson with Proactive Dealer Solutions. And I met him. We started talking. We engaged right away. He sent his people out. We were with him at least 2 years. They took us to a whole nother level. And at that time, we were probably selling 40, 50, 60 cars, and with Lawson's help. And also, all along the way, Gus Camacho, I became really good friends with, because he was really the start of our industry of BDCs. But through Lawson's direction and help and intervention, we went from our 60 cars a month to over 300 and 5,000 accounts. Now that's an impressive story, and it really speaks to my people and of course everybody up in here. But as you'll learn as we talk through the rest of this and with your questions, one BDR is better than no BDRs. And you don't have to get to where I was, where I had 17 people in the room ultimately, and a budget of $800,000. But I would never, ever go about doing business without at least one BDR. And I'm hoping you'll learn more about that now.
Well, thank you guys. What a great panel. I'm very excited. I'm going to start with a quick question for our two dealers on the panel, Mike and Gus. And it's, what are a few tips that you can give a dealer that's setting up or potentially setting up a BDC for the very first time?
That's a really good question. Probably the top tip that I can give you is to hire a professional to come help you. BDCs are not easy. They're not easy to set up, and there's a couple things that make BDCs successful, and these are things that you really need an expert to come in and help you. When I first started mine, I did it without an expert, and it didn't do very well. And the reason why I started one was exactly what Mike had just mentioned. I decided to listen to my calls that were coming in the sales department, and I was shocked at how horrible they were. People were calling and they're like, "Yeah, I just drove by and saw this, red truck on the line. Just wanted to know what the price is." "Oh yeah, that, back then it would have been probably $69.95. That's $69.95. Okay, thank you. Bye. Click." And no follow-up, no committing the customer to come in, nothing else. And you can tell that my salesperson was eating food while they were doing it. So I mean, it was horrible. So after listening to these calls, I said, I need to do something. Plus, at the time, the internet was going, and we were starting to get these internet leads. They weren't being called back. 2-3 days later, somebody would get a hold of the customer to try again when they had time to call back, and if you pushed them to do it. So there needed to be. So it first started off more of an internet kind of guy that at the same time would be taking calls, and while it worked, it wasn't very good. And I ended up hiring Lawson Owens over here with Proactive Dealer Solutions, and he came in and he did an incredible job setting us up. But I'll tell you, it's not an easy thing to do, but it's a great payoff. One thing that's probably the most important thing to a BDC is making sure that your staff is following the BDC, or what they call them BDRs, BDC representatives, are following a script. So when you start something, the whole purpose is that you have them trained, they go by the script, they follow the script, and the scripts are created in such a way that creates appointments. Because the number one goal of a person in the BDC department is to create appointments. They set the appointments, I'm getting to the dealership, and then it's your sales team's job to sell them a vehicle. And without these scripts, and then without the accountability and making sure they're following the scripts, it's just not going to happen. And then you've got, who do you hire? Who do you bring on board? There's a lot of questions, and we can answer those questions for you. But the one probably most important tip that I could give you if you're looking into starting a BDC is go find a professional company. And there's a lot of them out there. Lawson Owens is one of them, but there's a lot of them out there as well too. And go out and find one and hire them on and bring them on board and let them help you set that up. That's going to be your number one thing. Another tip is be patient. You're going to go through a lot of people before you find the right. Don't think that this is something where you're going to hire 5 people and all of a sudden it's just got to start go gangbusters and you're going to be doing good. How many salespeople do you guys have to go through to find the right ones, right? You hire 10 and you end up keeping one long term. It's the same thing with BDC. It's a tough job. They're on the phones. They're making a lot of calls. So you're going to go through some turnover before you get a good team put together, and especially finding a manager. If there's any other tips I can think of, let me see if there's something else here. I actually wrote down a couple tips here. Let me see if I got one more.
Don't use them all up. Save some for us.
Yeah, I'll save some for Mike, but I know there's one more thing that I had on here that I said this is really important. I got to make sure I measure. I talk about this. Oh, I know what it is. Make sure your entire team is okay with the BDC center. You have to incorporate your sales department and your BDC. So the first thing that's going to happen is that your sales department is you're going to get pushback from them. They're going to say, "Oh, these guys are these people in the BDC are going to steal my customers, and how do I get a lead, and this is unfair, and I'm used to always picking up the phone and doing a horrible job getting a lead, but at least I was getting phone calls, and now you got someone else doing it. So what I highly suggest is that you know, as you're going through the process of setting this up, that you make sure that it's a team effort. Make sure that you set something up to where the sales department understands that the BDC center is there to support them and help them increase their sales and make more money. And what I personally do is that whenever we hire a new salesperson, I have them sit in the BDC as part of their orientation, and they're in there for a whole day. They're in there listening to the calls, they're in there asking questions, and they get an idea of how difficult that job is and how much work they do to get those appointments in. After this, and how important it is for your CRM to have really good notes so that the BDC can do proper follow-up. So all those things are things that they learn, and by the time they leave their orientation, there's less chance that they're going to be butting heads against your BDC department. Mike?
So just to add a few things to that, I think there's a statistic, I don't know, DJ and Jose and Lawson, if it's still true, but the average startup BDC, I think, fails within the first 14 months on average. Maybe that's changed. But it's for one reason, and this is the advice I'm going to give you if you're thinking about starting a BDC, is you personally, as the dealer, have to make a commitment to it. You have to be all in. And you have to be all in because what I experienced, what I knew just from learning from these guys, but even it's the logic of it. You're talking about people, their only reason in the company is to drive traffic to you and to your salespeople. That's all they do. They don't put food on their table unless they do. Now compare that with your average salesperson who's doing multiple things. And many times they're doing multiple things very well. But there's no doubt, if you follow the metrics that these guys teach you, as far as how many outbound attempts, whether they're in phones or in texts or in emails, what's the contact ratio? They teach you all these metrics, and you can track them. And then what's the conversion rate to get them to appointment? What's the show rate once they get there? And what's the delivery rate? Those are things you're never going to calculate if you turn it over to the sales department. You can with software, but it's important that they put the data in. If you have people that's all they do, and they do it right, and they're well trained and they're held accountable, it has to succeed, and it will succeed. But it will never succeed if after a 60-day cycle you have a bad month and you say, what the hell am I doing spending this money on BDC? These lazy salespeople can't do it. I'm going back to that. And that's how it ends. You got to just persevere and get through that and get your people better. But one other thing, if you're going to start it, it's very important what Gus said. If you have really experienced salespeople, if you got some old dogs out there that are very valuable to you, they're going to resist. They're going to resist this. Wait a minute, you're going to give that $12 an hour person my valuable call? I'm not taking that call. And then when you explain the metrics and that they're actually working for you, and when you come in on a Saturday and you have 37 appointments lined up and they're all pumped up, and you're even doing your staffing based on it, they get religion real quick. But they will resist at first. So be prepared to sell it to them and make sure that everybody's on board, because it won't work if you have that friction.
Good stuff. There's a lot of dealers in here. I do want to encourage you to hit the mics up if you have a specific question. One thing I really want to make sure we accomplish today is if you came with a question, you get it answered. I'm going to throw it over to Lawson. A common question I hear in 20 groups and around the country, just traveling and working with dealers, is at what size does it make sense to invest resources? Is my dealership too small? Or at what size does it make sense to begin to think about building a BDC?
Right. Great question. We hear that all the time as well. And I think Mike touched on it. Having one BDR is better than having no BDRs. And so there is no size that you're too small to have an appointment coordinator, somebody who's a telephone specialist, somebody whose function in life, to Mike's point, is to communicate, to move, to motivate your consumers to participate in the process to visit the dealership. You want to sell more cars, you want to service more cars, you need one thing, that's more traffic. The question becomes is where does that traffic come from? When you think about an operative who's going to be making 100 outbound phone calls, have 30 quality conversations, and schedule 6 to 8 appointments a day, that compounding effect throughout the week and the month is going to create and drive traffic to your store. So if you're a small store, start with one person. If I can't get the right return on investment from one person, then I can't manage 4 or 5 people effectively. And especially if you've never had a business development center in the past, move slow. Right? Get that return, get the comfort zone, get the proof of concept, get that return on investment, get that 15, 20, 25 unit increase, because that's what that person should be able to generate as a net gain of somewhere between 15 to 25 additional units a month if there's enough leads for them to be working. So there is no real size. Start small, start with just one, and then move forward from there.
You know, another thing that comes up often is the click to call. With the internet, you know, buyers aren't necessarily traveling from dealership physically, dealership to dealership to dealership to dealership, shopping all day. They're going from dealership to dealership to dealership to dealership. And we're now in an age where they can just hit your phone number. They've been on your website, they've seen a car they're interested in, and I'm telling you, 85%, that's not a real statistic, but a strong majority of the prospects that are calling your dealership today on an inbound call, the call sounds something like, hey, I was on your website. Can you tell me about? That's a hot lead. Jose, what do you, at Applied Concepts, what do you guys encourage dealers to do when they're on that call? As far as, we know that the appointment has been critical historically, but what are some other things that are also important on that call? And then I'll come to you right after he finishes.
You know, one of the things that when you look at the phone call, the common theme in all auto dealers understand is name, number, and appointment, right? It's been preached since day one, since DJ sold his first car, right? So as we unpack this deal, one of the key parts you have to be is engaging and motivating on the phone. You have to establish a reason or value behind the appointment so they actually show up. And part of that is having good control, oftentimes slowing down, kind of like Mike, you shared listening to calls through who's calling. Inspection is a huge part of the process, And a big thing we focus on is, are we slowing down, having engaging conversations with purpose? I.e., are we driving towards the appointment, driving towards getting that customer in the door? That's the biggest thing I can tell you, is having purpose in the conversation to build value.
It's good stuff. Sir, did you want to ask your question?
Sure, I just wanted to know your general opinion on setting up a virtual BDC where you outsource it to some company that has the set staff, the whole shebang.
You know, when it comes to how I would answer is, I think there's a lot of, I do work with stores that do use outsourced BDCs and have had great success with it. I also work with a lot of stores that have chosen to actually invest and really drill down into this part. I think, like what has been shared by everyone in this panel so far, is when you get in, if you're going to embark on the journey of doing a BDC in yourself, you got to go big or go home. That's the best way I can tell you. Because if you invest in it, and I think, Lawson, I'm sure in your experience you've seen, when you invest in it and you engage in it, it'll get better. And there's nothing better than having an in-house BDC that you can have that control to make sure you're delivering the message you want them to deliver, is what I'd add.
More importantly, I think the whole purpose of a business development center is to enhance the customer experience, right? And to condense time, make it easier for them to do business with your organization. And I have never seen an outsourced solution where a dealer has stayed with it long term and seen any real tangible growth or increase in sales or service business. And I just don't think anyone is going to service, love on your customers more than you and your people will. And I think that the outsourcing is maybe an option for a lot of organizations, but I've never seen it be a real long-term solution for a store.
Yeah, we've never outsourced, so I'm not very experienced. Other than I have outsourced when we've had a real big sale, like we do a big mailer and we're expecting tons of calls. I have gone through companies where they'll take my overflow and we make sure that they're using our CRM and the notes are going in our CRM and we're monitoring what they're doing. But it's probably not a bad option of giving that a shot. I do warn you though, if you are going to outsource, if I was in your shoes, I would make sure that it's that they're a BDC that knows our industry. And it depends on what you do. You know, are you a buy here, pay here dealer? Are you a subprime deal? Are you a prime customer, a prime dealer? You know, those are all questions that I would be asking whatever outsourcing company to make sure that they know the specifics of our industry and they're able to answer the questions. We do use artificial intelligence through one company for Facebook and doing text blasts, and they have a BDC, but they tee over to us, and a lot of times we'll just jump in and take over the conversation because we're just a lot better than they are at it. So I do have that experience on outsourcing, where we do outsource with artificial intelligence, and they're answering back and forth texts through artificial intelligence. If the artificial intelligence can't answer it, it goes to their BDC, and if they can't, it goes to ours. But we have the option of going in there and just taking over the conversation, and we do it all the time.
If you are going to outsource, just be sure that you have some performance expectations, a criteria of performance from this organization. Don't just blatantly hand it over. Have an expectation of conversion ratios for inbound sales calls, internet inquiries, unsold traffic, database mining, or campaigns. Have some standards of performance that you're going to hold them accountable to ensure that they're maximizing your traffic to the extent that is fair or reasonable to expect.
DJ, Jose mentioned how to, not only is the appointment setting important, but also engaging conversations. And I know you've trained for a long time on tactics and specifics on the phone about how to do that. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Let me do my 2 minutes. My 2 minutes is, I've been to over 1,700 dealerships. I'm not interested. You go to Jose now and you go to my friend Larson. They'll help you. I'm very concerned that I do Wounded Warriors, and we have 47% show-up ratio at Ford stores. Do you have that? We book the appointment a quarter after the hour or a quarter before the hour. People cut their hair by appointments. They golf by appointment. Why don't we sell a car by appointment? There's an expression, you can't do today's business with yesterday's thinking and hope to be ahead tomorrow. With technology today, I know, Gus, where my service department worked last month. I know where the cars are. So guess where my BDC center's working? Where I'm selling. All that technology is there. I'm the guy with props. I carry pacifiers with me for people who whine all the time. And a lot of you in this room, they whine. If I told you even which ear you use on the phone makes a difference of the call. If I had a stroke, if my father had a stroke and a stroke affected the right side of his body, which brain did the stroke actually occur in? The left. When you're on the phone with someone, hold the phone in your left ear comes off your right brain, feeling an emotion. It's not what you say on the telephone, it's what the customer heard you say on the telephone. And last week, I told these guys, last week I spoke at Trump International, and it was for Internet 20 groups. You had to sell 800 cars a month. Some of them sold 1,200 and 1,400 a month. Now, you ready? I said, just hire good people for your BDCs. People that care about people. If you have special finance, like in BDC centers, a special finance people, today with our economy, good people have had tough breaks. We should treat them that way. Help good people. So because I do Hertz and Avis, at Hertz and Avis, we give you a reservation code. So Gus, I still use mine. I said, Mrs. Johnson, you have a piece of paper? Yeah. I said, Mrs. Johnson, let me give you your authorization code. This lady goes, authorization code? Now this is special finance. She's been turned down by everyone. But she takes a paper and pen and just writes down, DJH 107. I said, could you repeat it back? DJH 107. And then I go and do a whole spiff list on her. I said, could you bring in a local bill, a utility bill or something with you? That's for special finance. Every one of your people in your BDC should be specialized in what they do. So if you get a third-party lead, if you give it to everybody, they burn them. And then you wonder why the lead didn't work. And the lead worked. It's just our people didn't work them. Okay, thank you for asking me the question.
Oh, that's great. Go back to our dealers, and Mike, if you'll start. I know another common question I hear is you have salespeople, and part of their job is to take care of the phones. Why have a BDC when you already hire salespeople? They should be answering the phones. What's your take on that argument or that decision?
Okay, that's a great question. It's one that's commonly asked. It's one of the justifications, supposedly, for people close down their BDCs. But I go back to the who's calling. I'll go back to my experience of what salespeople do really well. And you might have a gem of a salesperson that does everything well, but they're in very short supply. The thing that BDC also does, in answering this question, is it holds your people accountable. And we haven't even talked about some other things they'll do actually to reduce areas of expense in the process. The areas of expense it can reduce, it'll find out what advertising is working and what isn't. And it won't be from the rising tide theory, it'll be from directly from your CRM and the data they put in there, where the call came from. Secondly, it's going to enormously help your reputation because your BDRs are going to hear it. They're going to hear the complaints. They're going to hear that the phone system isn't working. They're going to hear that service didn't pick up the call and it bounces back to them. So it helps to keep everything accountable that way. And third thing, and really important, which you're not going to get from your salespeople, and that is a disciplined approach to data mining. I don't know what the average length of time that everyone in this room has been in business, but if you have a CRM and you've been in business for more than 2 years and you're entering the data in there, even just the sold, let alone the missed appointments, things like that, it won't take long before you have thousands of data mining opportunities. Now, I want to ask you, what salesperson in your company today is making 100 to 150 outbound calls to people that haven't been contacted 60 days plus in your CRM? And maybe some of you have some of them, but I can tell you generally, it's probably somewhere between 0 and 1%. That's where you're going to get. That's what they do. That's what they're paid to do. So they're data mining. They're saving money on inefficiencies. They're identifying areas of your business that aren't working. And obviously, those are all areas where you're not going to get that return if you hand it over just to your salespeople. In addition to making thousands, 37,000 outbound calls a month we were making at our height, 37,000. Now that was with 13 BDRs, but just divide to 13, it's thousands of contacts that are going out on attempts that you will not get if you didn't have a BDC.
It's also about how quickly you get back to the customer. When you have your sales team calling back the customers, they're out on the floor selling a car, they're trying to get the deal done in finance, they're outside drinking coffee, they're doing all kinds of stuff that, whether it's sell or not sell related, but they're not getting back to those customers quick enough. And I think that at any presentation you go to, and there's stats all over the place that tell you, how quickly a customer buys. Sometimes you hear it's within 24 hours and 48 hours, whatever. But the faster you get back to the customer, the better opportunity you have of selling them a vehicle. And just that alone is a reason for having a BDC center. And if you look at your salespeople that you currently have now, how many are really good at following up? And how many are really good at answering the phones? And even if you trained them, would they still be good? Somebody that you have in BDC is very, very different than a salesperson. They're just different breed of people. They have one goal, and that's just to set up an appointment. Your salespeople are just all over the place. I went through for many, many years, and with Joe Verde and even some Grant Cardone and pushing these guys, and I still use them for sales training, but I was really using it to train them for phone skills and for setting appointments and for follow-up. But when I set up my BDC, it was crazy. I saw a 20% growth immediately, and it's something that we would have never seen, and we wouldn't have gotten to the point where we're at without it. So it's a big difference. So you got the time. There's the other thing that you do is you do still have that 20%, 30% of your salespeople that are good at follow-up. You can let them continue doing it. Just by having a BDC doesn't mean that you stop having your sales team follow up. I push everybody to follow up, sales department and BDC. The more people that can get a hold of the customers, the better.
I don't know if you've ever heard the saying that when people get confused, they do nothing. But I know, unless you're in a 20 group, if you're a dealer and you're considering a BDC, you may be hesitating just because one of these guys, you're not in a 20 group, one of these guys, you don't know these guys, you're not sure how to migrate into that or how to ease into that. Lawson, who's in charge of the BDC? How do you manage it, especially from the beginning? And who comes first, the BDC manager or the BDR?
Good question. So who's in charge of the BDC? I think, and Mike touched on this, I think it starts at the top, right? you need a champion in the dealership. You need someone who's going to be the driver of that department. And BDC is really more of a cultural approach more than just a function or a task, right? It's about how do I enhance, like I said, the customer experience? How do I increase my awareness to the opportunities that we have? How do we move and motivate the consumer to want to visit the dealership? How do I have more consistent, effective, long-term follow-up and follow-through? So it really starts at the top down, because you will have people push back. You will have people fight it, because there is a higher level of accountability. And a lot of people in our industry don't like accountability. But accountability is really nothing more than awareness, right? So who runs the BDC from a department standpoint? If you have 1, 2, or maybe even 3 people, you probably don't need a manager. You might be able to get away with a team lead, right? You pay this person an extra $1 or $2 an hour to be like the lead person, to give you the information, to give you the feedback, to make sure that the reports are accurate. But once you get above 2 or 3 people, you're going to need a manager, somebody who's going to really drive the activity and the behaviors of that department. At the end of the day, it comes down to activity management, behavior management. The math, the numbers will take care of themselves if we have the right activities and the behaviors in place. And just wanted to touch on some of the things about follow-up. If you just focus in on your 90-day rolling average of unsold traffic, unsold phone traffic, floor traffic, internet traffic, if you just look at your 90-day rolling average of that traffic, and if you could sell 1, 2, or 3%, for some of you that might be 20 or 30 additional cars, just from your 90-day rolling average. The biggest challenge that we have out there in the industry is we do a horrible job logging traffic. Average dealer loses 35 or 40% of their floor traffic because it's never logged. 25 to 30% of their phone traffic because it's never logged. So we're not utilizing the technology that we have readily available to us. So when you think about Business Development Center, it doesn't have to be the inbound call. It could just be proactive outreach. And again, if you focus on your 90-day rolling average, you could sell 20 or 25 more cars in very short order.
Great stuff. I think we had a question here. Yes, sir?
Hey, appreciate your time, guys. Just one quick question. Are there any special considerations for creating a BDC in a buy here, pay here dealership? Or is that something that you've seen or had experience with? Thanks.
That'd be Mike.
Well, either.
Yeah, I'm all buy here, pay here. Gus is buy here, pay here, and retail and new car store. Now, it doesn't matter if, actually, I believe BDC originated with Ford service departments and for service appointments. So it's about selling appointments, and it works no matter what you're selling. So it was the key driver of our growth in buy here, pay here.
I'll tell you what I do like about having the BDC working the buy here, pay here customers when they're calling is that when they show up to the dealership, they're not only are they ready to buy, but they have all their steps with them, and it makes the process so much faster. Our BDC is so good at making sure that they show up. So when they walk in, asking for the manager with all their steps in their hand, you know that was a BDC appointment.
The big thing, when you think about business development, there's 3 different aspects. One is the reactionary, the second is the follow-up, and then the third would be both. So buy here, pay here, or just a conventional retail, your phone is still ringing. How effectively are we processing and handling those inbound calls? You still have unsold traffic. Are we following up and following through with that unsold traffic consistently and effectively? You need to have a 90 to 120-day follow-up process that is pretty rigorous. And then after that, you should be touching your customers, whether it be sold or unsold, 3 or 4 times a year to maintain that relationship, to maintain the rapport. So there's the only component from a buy here, pay here would be different scripting. You would have a different script, a different process for a buy here, pay here.
DJ, real quick.
Yeah, I'll just add one tip to all of you. I still call. Now, I served at the Last Supper, but I still call the day before the first payment. Buy here, pay here. And the person on the other end says, Mr. Harrington, are you going to call me every 2 weeks? And I want to tell him, if you're not here to pay, I will be calling you and all your friends. I will. But today with video, I want you to know when someone calls our Business Development Center, we actually answer, and Gus is correct, the faster you get back, some of these people within 2 hours are already in the process of making an appointment somewhere else. We send a video back, and co-video, the video goes right to the person. And so they get responded back. And today with technology, when someone's asking about a car, Mike, I actually go out on the lot and show the car and send it to them. And so all of a sudden, and I purposely, Lawson, tell people this is where the scratch is on the pre-owned car. Everything's pre-owned. There's more closes on a circular table than there's on a rectangular desk. There's more closes. It's just the way you handle things. But that's my tip.
Quick poll here. Would you raise your hand if you currently have a BDC? Raise your hand high if you have a BDC. So there's quite a few in here. That's great stuff. I know we have a question here, sir.
I actually have a couple of questions. They'll all jive together. The biggest problem we've had is how do you pay them? What practices do you have in a pay scale? What's a bonus plan? So I know they get a base pay, and then you spiff them on their appointments at show, and then spiff them on cars that sold. And then the other thing is, what characteristics do you look for in a BDR? Where do I go? Do I go to Starbucks and say, hey, that person treated me nice? Maybe go back there and say, hey, yeah, you probably make a good phone person. I know if you go on, what is the site where you, Indeed, there's a ton of people who say they've been a BDR for 2 months and all of a sudden they want to be a BDC manager, but you see that they've skipped and skipped and skipped. Obviously, I don't think they're cut out for it, but what characteristics are you looking for, pay scales, what have you done to make it attractive?
I'll start with that. As far as pay scales, a lot of it obviously is regional. You're going to pay somebody, if you have a dealership in Manhattan, you're going to pay them different than in Des Moines. But more to the point, you're going to pay them a base salary, hourly rate. You're going to pay them, some people pay by appointment, but typically you're going to pay by a show ratio, a sale ratio, and most emphasis for us anyway is on sale ratio. And then you're going to manage their accounts and make sure that they're making the right effort to produce the results that they want. As far as the type of people you're looking for, I remember years ago, a very successful guy in the buy here, pay here industry said, I get my best people from the Waffle House. So that pretty much applies. If they're people, and they like to talk to people, it's not like you're going to go out and say, do you have BDC experience? That can actually hurt you, as in other parts of your business. But if they're organized, if they can take direction, if they can follow a script, and obviously the same thing we always look for, self-starters and motivated, then they'll succeed. And I would cast a wide net because there's a lot of backgrounds that are successful in BDC.
My point plan is very similar to what you actually mentioned. I pay them, I think it's $12 an hour or $11 an hour base, and then it's sales times sales bonus. So if their contribution is 20 deals, it'd be 20 times 20. That's a $400 bonus. And then I also pay them on appointment shows. I believe we're at $3 a show for every person that shows. And the manager, she's on a base salary. She makes 6 digits because she's really, really good. So she's expensive. But again, she's contributing to over 50% of our sales. Her bonuses are all tied on contribution. So if the BDC contributes, in order for her to even qualify for a bonus, her department has to contribute for at least half of our sales, which they always do. They're usually between 54 and 56% of our sales. As for hiring, I had mentioned when I spoke earlier that it's tough to find BDRs. It really is, because it's a tough job. Nobody wants to be on the phone all day making calls, but they're out there. And what we do is we find a lot through Indeed. We'll post in Indeed, and we always post for customer service representative, and we bring someone that wants to be a customer service representative, and that's where we usually get them. We look for personalities. They have to have outgoing and friendly personalities. They got to be good on the phone. You got to be able to understand what they're saying. If you can't understand what they're saying, it's not going to work out. So just some of the simple things. We also do a career fair, and this is we do this not only for BDC, but we do it for our sales department. So once a month, we have a career fair at our dealership. When my dealership used to be out of a trailer on a little dirt lot, we were doing it at a little restaurant, and we were using their banquet room. Now we have a really nice showrooms and the whole thing, so we do it at the dealership. But we do once a month. We advertise it on electric billboard, and we'll put an ad in Indeed that we're having a career fair. And we'll usually get 30 to 60 people that'll show up. And then we interview them for sales and also for BDC and for any other positions that we have open.
Did you have a question, ma'am? Oh, go ahead.
You're talking a lot about the phone, are you also finding using texting and email and other video, all that?
Yeah,
how is
that's
that being
interesting you
used?
say that. Great question, because obviously in recognizing the advancements in technology, Lawson obviously drilled us in the metrics of outbound calls, and we were always talking about they got to make 100 outbound calls. We looked on our finality reports. We'd get them every day. How many they making? How many they making? And little by little, when I would call my general managers, well, let me see the finality reports. Hey, I see they're down to like 90, they're down to 80, they're down to 70, and yet they're very effective. They're selling a lot of cars. I mean, and eventually I said, what's going on with this? Well, they're texting now. They're not doing outbound phone calls. They're doing outbound phone calls, but the more effective way to reach the customer, particularly as DJ mentioned, when you have an approval, DJ mentioned you can write it, the customer write it down. That's what we always used to do, but now we text it to them. We text them the approval code. We can confirm the appointment that way. So, it was an excellent question. You're going to more and more of our effort is going to be through texting, which obviously is the most effective communication tool we have.
Yeah, but make sure that my recommendation is that you have a good CRM before you start off your BDC, where the salesperson are logging. We use Promax. I like the system. I've used it for a lot of years. I think, Mike, you use Promax too, right? No. Oh, Dealer Socket. Okay. There's a lot of good ones out there. And then when you do the texting, make sure you're in compliance. So whichever provider you use for texting, don't text out of a cell phone. Don't have them texting out of their cell phones. Use a provider where you're going through your system and it has the opt-in and opt-out features in it, so they can stop opt-out. So you don't want to get into a big old class action lawsuit.
For us, when we talk about emailing and texting, I think each has its place, but you've got to monitor the contact ratio. Phones are still going to give you the highest contact ratio. Texting is great for appointment confirmations, for missed appointments, but the purpose, at least from our perspective, the purpose of the email is to move them to the phone. The purpose of the text is to move them to the phone. That personal interaction, that exchange is going to give you a higher conversion ratio of an appointment and then ultimately a show. You want to leverage all communication mediums, but there's an 8% participation and engagement rate from emails that are being sent out. Think about you. When you leave here, you're all going to check your phone. You're going to check your emails. How many times do you open, read, and respond to your emails? Right? So we don't. So email has its place, but it's not going to be the primary tool. So you've got to monitor your contact ratio, the engagement rate from the consumer, and then you have to monitor your people, because people will always take the path of least resistance, which is that email, and you're not going to yield the same results as the phone.
And if I may piggyback on what you're talking about, when it comes to texting and email, it's a great way of communicating, right? The one main thing that lacks is emotion. You cannot display emotion or engage somebody via text or an email. A lot of times, got to have a call to action, whether it's a phone call or to confirm that appointment. Because, best way I always explain to salespeople I work with is, how often have you sent a text and has been miscommunicated or misread to your significant other?
I'll also mention that when I was an operator, I was working with some of the guys at, excuse me, Grant Cardone, and Michael was his name. And I think the average person, the latest stat I read, the average text message is checked in like 5 seconds, which, we check our text messages pretty quick. But once we got some rapport built, just a little bit of rapport, he started sending me short videos and texting them to me. And try to delete a video on your text and not watch it. At least open it. I mean, you have to watch it. Sir, I know you had a question. And quick response, because we're running low.
Quick question. I just out of everybody's kind of touching it one way or the other throughout the presentation, but the importance of almost this assembly line type structure with the BDC. You have, and we call them openers or appointment setters, I think is what you guys are calling them, and then you have the closers, and then you have the finance, the F&I or whatever. Is that important, that assembly line type process, and how do you implement that?
So our BDC specifically just makes appointments. So if it was an assembly line, I guess they would be the first ones that are setting the appointment. Once the appointment show, they don't greet the customers or anything. They're upstairs in our phone room, and they're working, making calls. The appointment is set to a manager. When the manager greets the customer, then the manager will flips it to a salesperson. And it's very important that it goes to the manager, because that way the manager can control which salesperson is going to get it, and also be able to make sure that they're being logged as a BDC appointment. If you're paying your BDRs on an appointment shows, you want to make sure that it's being logged properly and that they're being taken care of. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. We still have F&I, and we still have, desk managers and the whole thing. It's just all they're doing is setting appointments.
I think at the end of the day, BDC is all about process execution. I mean, we have a road to the sale for our salespeople, right? And I think that the same basic concept has to be instilled into the business development center. We should have a road to the sale for inbound sales calls. We should have a road to the sale for unsold traffic. We should have a road to the sale for internet leads. And the ones that succeed at the high rate are the ones that have the daily discipline of implementation and execution of those basic fundamental best practices. So for me, everything comes down to a process.
Let's give these guys a hand. Awesome panel. A lot of experience up here. I encourage you to track these guys down and ask them any questions if you didn't get an answer to them, and enjoy the rest of your day today. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Hey, good job.